I want to start out with a question before I do the reading itself. The reading is brief enough to give me time to ask the question. And the question is, what do fake news and alternative facts have in common? That's the question. The answer is out of touch with reality. And that is the intro to this reading. So what I'm going to do is put the book down, take the flyleaf, and just read to you what the book is about. The book, the title of the book is The Ashtray. The subtitle of the book is The Man Who Denied Reality. The author of the book is Errol Morris. And the man who denied reality, his name is Thomas Kuhn. Some of you may have heard of Thomas Kuhn. He's a historian and philosopher of science who, in the early 60s, wrote a book called The Structure of Scientific Revolutions. At that time, the word paradigm and the term paradigm shift was not in the common vocabulary. Now we all use that term practically every day. Here comes the reading. In 1972, philosopher of science Thomas Kuhn threw an ashtray at Errol Morris. This book is the result. At the time, Morris was a graduate student, and Kuhn was his thesis advisor. I think it was at Princeton. Now we know Morris as one of the most celebrated and restlessly probing filmmakers of our era, the creator of such classics of documentary investigation as The Thin Blue Line. You remember that one, had the music of Philip Glass in it. And The Fog of War, which is about McNamara and the Vietnam War. Kuhn, meanwhile, was, and posthumously remains, a star in his field. As I said, the author of The Structure of Scientific Revolutions, a landmark book that has sold well over 1 million copies and introduced the concept of paradigm shifts to the larger culture. And Morris thought the idea was bunk. The Ashtray, this book, tells why and makes a powerful case for Morris's view of way of viewing the world, central to which is a fundamental conception of the necessity of truth. For me, Morris writes, truth is about the relation between language and the world. It's a correspondence idea of truth. Morris has no patience for philosophical systems that settle for internal coherence and disdain the world itself. Morris is after bigger game. He wants to establish as clearly as possible what we know and what we can say about the world, about reality, history, our actions, and interactions. It's the fundamental desire that animates his filmmaking. Truth may be elusive, but that doesn't mean that we have to deny its existence through philosophical evasions. In a time when truth is denigrated and lies are celebrated, this book, The Ashtray, is a bracing reminder of the value of truth.
Dan Rivas is the Director of Communications and Marketing of Portland's City Club. City Club was founded in 1916 during the progressive movement of the early 20th century. Its members viewed themselves as community watchdogs. Today, the club tackles some of the toughest issues facing our region and advocates for change based on its research findings. Prior to joining City Club, Dan helped Charles Schwab, Hewlett-Packard, Idealware, and many other organizations develop communication strategies to help people take meaningful action. A strategic communicator who likes to find the heart of the story, he has also written articles and essays for Brick Magazine, the nonprofit Times, lost my place, Oregon Humanities, the Register Guard, Skide Magazine, TechSoup, and others. Dan received his undergraduate degree at Willamette University and a Master's of Fine Arts at the University of Michigan, emphasis in creative writing. He and his wife are raising 2 daughters in Northeast Portland, where you can find them playing soccer, singing along to Red Yarn, baking cakes, and trying to crack the code of the knock-knock joke. Please welcome Dan Rivas.
Thank you, Joyce. So thank you for inviting me here. Thank you, Todd, for the invitation. This is a real treat for me because this is a chance to talk about City Club, this 100-plus-year-old organization that everyone seems to know, but is becoming, I think, a new and more exciting place. And so I wanted to share with you sort of where we're going. Are any of you City Club members in the audience right now? Todd? Are you familiar with City Club on some level? Yeah. We've been around long enough for most people have heard of us. Well, you know, the people who have heard of us, they often think about City Club as this. A lot of old men sitting around fancy tables. Maybe they think about this, the politics that we get involved in. This is the governor's debate from a few years ago. They think City Club members are all this guy, you know, poring over the pages, very serious, maybe a little grumpy. And so, okay, there's some truth in a lot of this. We are somewhat these people, but only partly so. And, you know, part of what's fun for me is I don't really identify with any of those things exactly. I came to City Club from a different angle here. And so, who am I and why am I here? I don't know if you guys remember this great moment in the vice presidential debate. Admiral Stockdale, he goes up there and he's the outsider, the third-party candidate, and he starts by saying, "Who am I and why am I here?" Which I thought was one of the funniest moments in American politics. But he got lambasted and he was seen as a joke, and I thought that was really interesting because, in fact, I think that is an example of institutions not recognizing that an outsider has something to offer here. I just love a sense of humor in a debate, too. This is where I'm from, just north of Seattle, the Skagit Valley. If any of you have ever been up I-5 that far north on your way to Canada. Farm country, rural place. It's really one of the more beautiful places in the world, I think. And this is my father's family. I have a pointer here. That's him right there. They were migrant farm workers, and he was one of 11 kids. And they came to the Skagit Valley in the 60s with the idea that this is a place that they could put down roots and call home. And so for him and for my family, this place was a chance to make something new. So this is my family's restaurant that they started in the 60s. This is my Uncle Aof who runs it now. There's a cousin, my Aunt Deborah. It's a place that, you know, my whole growing up and really it's been around now for 40-something years, has been this sort of family hub where people, you know, almost everyone in the family worked there at some point. They hang out there. My dad used to just spend every morning drinking coffee, hanging out with his brothers and sisters and the people who came through the restaurant. It's called the Mexico Cafe in Mount Vernon, Washington. It's still there. If you ever are driving through, go out to the San Juan Islands, if you're taking the ferry from Anacortes, it's right there on Memorial Highway. I encourage you all to stop in if you get a chance. But yeah, this is sort of where I came from. And this was a feeling, you know, this is a kind of newer but maybe old American story of people come to this country, they try to find work, they try to find a home, and then they sort of move on to other opportunities in the culture. And so I'm in this interesting spot where I feel like I'm straddling a couple of different worlds, and I feel like I am not exactly of their world anymore, but the City Club did not feel like a place that was where I belong either. But I talked to a few of you, and a lot of you have heard of City Club through the radio, through hearing our Friday forums. That's how most people hear about City Club. And I'm kind of a radio junkie. I know Todd is also, and we are actually collaborating on a podcast, bringing that kind of mutual love of radio together. And so anyway, I listen to radio whenever I can, wherever I can, and I started hearing the City Club's Friday forums almost as soon as I moved here. And I kind of got hooked. I mean, every week there was something kind of interesting, kind of wonky. We'd talk about traffic, we'd talk about housing issues, you know, congestion pricing, fluoride was, I remember, a big thing, and has been a big thing I've discovered in Portland and City Club for 70 years, I think. And so that's how I sort of discovered City Club, and I thought this was something that's kind of interesting to me. But at the same time, it was not a place that I was eager to go check out, really. In my mind, you listen to radio, so you have to make the pictures in your head. In my mind, I was thinking sort of what we saw in that first picture. Serious old men, like wood-paneled rooms, everything kind of dark. And I wasn't sure that was a place for me. I kind of was worried, like, people are going to realize I'm a phony if I show up there. But City Club sort of stayed on my radar, and a job opening came up, and I thought, this, when I looked at the job description, it kind of looked like it did describe me. It was kind of a wonky, geeky, but maybe in an interesting way kind of place. And most importantly, the job description was really about change. We were here to make change. This is from the very beginning of City Club, that was the mission, to change Portland and to, Joyce mentioned the sort of watchdog mentality of the progressive movement in the beginning. That was why City Club came to be. It was because it felt like the city government was corrupt and they needed someone to watch them closely and hold them accountable. So that really appealed to me. And so I came and I found that this place actually has a really long, interesting history. It also has a program model that was really promising because it really brings a lot of people together and gets a lot of people involved in various ways. And I found that was really interesting too. So I kind of got a little bit deeper in and got a little bit more interested until finally I decided, actually Julia Meyer, our executive director, I think in my first interview she said, we are going to be an anti-racist organization. I can't remember exactly what she said after that. It might have been sort of like, are you in? And I was like, yes, I am in. No one's ever said that to me. No one's ever posed that opportunity to me before. And I was like, this is different than what I expected and pretty exciting. And so I'm going to go back to the history a little bit because I do think there's something interesting here that leads us to the present moment. As we've already mentioned, 1916 is when the club was founded. That was 102 years ago, more than a century ago. And from the beginning, we were putting stuff out for the public. That was one of the main obligations the members felt to the community. Let's get on radio, let's publish bulletins, sort of like a newspaper that went out, I think weekly for a long time, and really provide a kind of wealth of information for the public. And one of those great successes came in 1946. We did a report that recommended that land up this way, not far from here, become a park. In fact, our report, I think, recommended that we designate the land a forest park, kind of general term. Well, they called it Forest Park, and it's one of the great treasures of our city, actually. And that was City Club members who decided, like, we're going to figure out what's the best way to use this land for the public, and we're going to make that recommendation and lobby hard for it until it happens. And that's sort of what City Club members have done over the years. I mentioned fluoride. We first reported on fluoride in 1955, and I don't know what everyone's politics are here, but this debate that's been going on here for a long time and doesn't quite feel resolved, maybe because people who want fluoride in water will not be satisfied until we do, but City Club has reported on it almost every decade since then, including our most recent opportunity to vote on that. And to me, it speaks to sort of the determination of our members that when they feel like there's an issue that matters to them, they're going to follow through on it and see it through to its conclusion, whatever that might be. Another important note here is 1973 was the first time City Club admitted women, which is kind of incredible to me when you think about soon after that, and even during that time, how active women were in Portland politics and how much women were contributing to civic life here. City Club was way behind the times, and 1973, that actually didn't come until a 3-year campaign by a group who call themselves the Politically Oriented Women. Vera Katz was very involved in that. So was Gretchen Kafori, and they really pushed City Club hard. City Club took multiple votes. People quit City Club, and it was a really interesting, contentious time to finally do the obvious, right? Like now, all these years later, 45 years later, our past president is a woman, our executive director is a woman. Like City Club is run by women, actually. And that is something that in 1972 seemed ridiculous and impossible to members. So it's really fascinating to see how far we've come. And it really speaks to me to what this moment is as well. Like, what is our question, what is our opportunity to make City Club the club it needs to be for the next century? Over here, there's just a series of reports kind of showing the breadth of things that we've reported on. We talked about race, homosexuality, street fees, pretty much anything you can think of, we've reported on it at some point, and our members have done the research and put forward a recommendation that has, I think, influenced conversations in various ways. And right now, our latest report, I think I'll mention this more later, but we're talking about, does the city government's structure really work? Does it represent Portlanders well? And we have a report coming out in October, I think, and we'll talk about that. So let me go a little bit more into what City Club does, because I think I've sort of alluded to things but haven't quite explained it entirely. One of our primary things is research. We are an organization that brings together volunteers, try to bring together a diverse group of volunteers to research a question and really bring forward answers on that question. So I mentioned city government. We also did one on earthquake preparedness recently that we're doing advocacy for, which is the other piece of this, trying to help Portland prepare for what we think is probably a major earthquake coming very soon. So members, volunteers do that research. Then when the membership passes at the, I think, 2/3 level vote, then that kicks in advocacy, where we can go out then and say to the city, to the state, we recommend these things, let's make them happen. So it's sort of a lobbying, like citizen lobbying effort, combined with, hopefully, I think when we do it well, kind of bringing more people power to some of the efforts that are already happening with other organizations. And then I already mentioned forums. We do Friday Forum almost every Friday. I see Todd almost every Friday. And we bring together speakers, interesting panels where people can debate the issues or maybe build on an idea and hopefully inform the public and bring out an issue for people to ask questions and sort of take the conversation forward. Let's see. Let me see if I can figure out how to actually play this now that I'm looking at this. There's a short video that we made that sort of, I think, captures where City Club is at the moment. And I wanted to play that for you. It is embedded in this PowerPoint. So let's see if this will work if I just press play.
In the early 70s, my father quit the City Club because they made a decision to allow women in. City Club moved on, and my father did not.
100 years. It's 100 years, and to see what City Club has evolved through over those 100 years is impressive, that it's still here and that it's more vibrant than ever. As a member of the Civic Scholars Committee, student voice, it is important and that we want to hear it. And I think you're seeing that movement actually happen across the nation right now.
It really teaches me about our local climate, what's going on in our neighborhoods and our cities, and how to take action so that I can make this city a better place. Right now in this moment, I think of transformation as a club. Now we're bringing networks of people together who don't look the same. networks of people together who aren't from the same neighborhoods, networks of people together who have different ideas and philosophies, and that's the whole premise of having a club that's about civic engagement.
City Club can offer a platform for the community to engage in dialogue, not bringing an agenda to the table, but rather its agenda is the civil discourse and the opportunity for people of differing opinions to come together and discuss those issues.
People who are committed to making their community better. And that's the sort of common denominator of City Club members that I've encountered over the years.
It would birth a new generation of leaders. So to me, that means seeing folks from many different socioeconomic backgrounds, seeing more people of color in leadership, seeing more women in leadership.
We started as an organization that wanted to engage community in making Portland better, and that's what we need to do again.
I have some younger friends, some millennials, and I love hearing their opinion on things because it's different from mine.
One of the things that inspired me to become a member is actually coming to City Club events and not seeing very many people that were like me. There's not very many younger women, so I can be part of the change and the influence.
I think we influence what is happening, the conversations that take place throughout the state of Oregon. Portland is made up of many of us that came from different rural communities throughout the state. And we do have a perspective that is unique, and I think it's important that we pay attention to that.
How we're going to connect to the new Portland. Change only happens when everybody's involved and they figure out how to work together in a collaborative way.
It's like its own kind of neighborhood without any boundaries.
The City Club now is more important than ever. It just opened my eyes to the possibilities.
What City Club means to me is really being engaged.
Continuing education.
Conversation.
Collaboration.
A collective voice.
Community.
It means people.
So one thing that you saw in our video that I actually also wanted to mention is we have a program called Civic Scholars, and it brings high school students to Friday forums. It gives them a chance to meet with the speakers before the forum, and is part of sort of what I'm talking about of City Club really trying to be that club for the next century. And one of the important ways that we need to do that is to really invite people in who haven't been well represented in City Club in the past. So the next century of City Club, it looks, I think, different than the century that we've seen in the past, and I think will look different in the coming years, and I think all that is great. And so those words that you heard those people say about learning, conversation, collaboration, that's the direction I think City Club needs to be going, and that's what we're working on building. Let me just check here. The idea that City Club members and the community at large is really hungry for a big tent organization, a place where everyone can sort of come together in the middle and talk about things. That's what we've realized. That is our charge. That is our mission for the next century City Club. I don't know how you guys have felt or what you've been observing, but I think we're seeing sort of a donut kind of shape to our communities right now, where there's a lot of communities that kind of are in a circle around each other, but the center is kind of hollow in a lot of ways. We think organizations like the City Club and possibly Humanist and other organizations can be those centers where people can come together and meet for the first time, sort of fill in that heart of the community that I think is being lost by a lot of the fragmentation that's happening in our politics and I think in identity on some level as well. And so that's what City Club is trying to be, and we really feel like it's important to represent or to invite in underrepresented groups. Women still are an underrepresented group actually at City Club. And of course, people of color, LGBTQ community, and young people are all groups that we really feel like we can't anymore wait for people to notice us and join in. We actually have to go and say, please join us. This is a place for you as well. You belong here. And so how do we do that? The first thing is, I think we need to be an organization that really has values and puts those values forward and really holds ourselves accountable to those values. So the 3 values that we developed over the past year are inclusion, the idea that we need to ensure that everyone is welcomed, heard, and respected when they come into a city club space. But while at the same time we also need to be independent. We cannot kind of follow the tides of whatever political movement is happening right now. We can't fall into the trap of partisan bias or, kind of getting squishy with the truth. We have to be uncompromisingly for the truth and stand up for the truth, even when that's risky, even when that might upset our membership. This is our charge. This is our mission and really our obligation to the community. We are a membership organization, but we are a 501c3, which means our actual first obligation is to the community, not to our membership, unlike, say, a trade organization where the primary obligation is to their membership. So we take that very seriously, and we always welcome feedback from our members, and I think that's an important part of being an organization that tries to welcome all voices and all people. While at the same time, we have to be able to make those decisions to say, like, this is actually in the best interest of our community. Even if our members want something different, we have to move forward in this way. Because justice, our third value, is really what this is all about. I mean, making Portland a better place for everyone to live really means framing every question in terms of, is this just? Is this making our society a more just place to live and creating opportunities for everyone to thrive here? And I think City Club has failed, to be very honest, in the past on that question, and we feel like we can't fail on that anymore. But how do we do those things? One of the things we need to do is just start listening. We've been doing a survey this past, I think it just closed a week or so ago, asking our members really some questions for the first time about who are you and what do you want. And so we see this giant bar here, we know that we are very white, and that is okay, but these people maybe don't feel like they're being welcomed here. And so we need to work on how do we bring these people up rather than, I think the assumption is, well, this is too big. That number is not too big. What's happening is we haven't brought in enough people who traditionally have felt out of place here. And so we're trying to find out who are our members, who is connected to City Club, and who can we bring in to make it a kind of fuller, richer place. And so political affiliation is also a really interesting one because, again, a giant bar here, this time for Democrats. And, this is probably not surprising in Portland. We're a pretty liberal town in general, while at the same time, this is going to sound weird to you probably, but Republicans are underrepresented at City Club, and that's a problem for us. And the reason why that's a problem is because it feels like we're in danger of becoming an echo chamber. And in this era of politics, I don't think that's good for anyone. So we've been asking these questions. We've been asking things like, how does it feel to be a member? Are you happy being a member? Things that we, from a kind of privileged place, have just assumed we didn't need to ask. And I think as a result, people felt like they weren't being heard. We weren't asking the questions that people wanted to be asked. And so we're thinking about everything. Maybe Friday Forum needs to change. Maybe our research structure needs to change. We're asking questions, we're gathering data because we want to figure out what do our members need, what does the community need, and what will ultimately help us reach our core values. And so all this is to say that we're doing these things with intention. And this is really, for the first time, I think, really intentionally, thoroughly asking hard questions about who City Club is, and realizing like things that had happened in the past where research was sort of rubber stamped because these are my friends and this is, you know, this group of people that I've kind of always been with at City Club. We can't rubber stamp the research anymore. We actually have to make sure that it's rigorous. We can't rubber stamp the committee makeup. If it's not a diverse committee, we make it diverse. We go out and recruit people to make sure that we have a diverse committee. And I think that's been a bone of contention for people who feel like, well, this is how it's always been done. These are my friends. This is how we should do the research. These are all smart people, and I know because I've worked with them forever. That's all well and good, but that's not leading us or living our core values. We need to make sure that not just your friends are on the committee. We need to make sure that people who bring in new perspectives and a diversity of views are going to influence the research and I think ultimately make the research better. And so it's about intention for us, and we know we have a lot of work ahead. We need to analyze the data. We need to go through a strategic planning process that really builds a structure to live those values. And it's going to take some time. And it's going to take a lot of conversation and collaboration. But we feel like that is the mission, the charge of the next century for City Club. So a few things coming up. If you are interested in City Club and you want to get involved, there's some really great things happening really in the next month or two. Ballotpalooza is happening next week, and if you've never heard of Ballotpalooza, City Club does research on all the ballot measures. Well, not all of them. Most of the ballot measures. There's kind of a fuzziness of you don't know what's on the ballot yet, but you need to start researching, so we sometimes miss. But in this case, we've done 5 of the ballot measures. Let's see if I can remember them all. We have a resolution on abortion. We have 103, the grocery tax ballot measure, 105 on the sanctuary state status, the Metro bond, and the Portland Clean Energy Fund. So those we did research projects on and have reports that we are going to unveil here on August 22nd. And this event is an opportunity for members to go up and debate the issues, debate the research that you might have seen on this issue, and see if we can move the conversation toward we generally agree, vote yes or vote no. City Club will then vote, and if it passes with a 2/3 majority, then that becomes an official report of City Club, and then we will advocate on that. So that means we'll put the information in the voters pamphlet and our recommendation to vote yes or no. And it means we'll get involved in campaigns and try to influence the vote. So that's something that's great for members to get involved. It's really a direct, active way to be part of the conversations happening before the November election.
Sure. On 50C3, you said just now influence the vote. I'm wondering how you guys managed to get across that problem.
Yeah, so we are required to be nonpartisan. So we cannot endorse any candidates or a party, but we can lobby on behalf of issues, nonpartisan issues. So all of our ballot measures are citizen, well, not all of them, but most of them are citizen-led ballot measures, a couple referrals as well in that mix. But we're able to take a stand on that like any actually nonprofit would be able to do, as long as it's not in endorsement of a political party or a candidate. So that's a distinction, an important one, and one that feels important to us not only for our nonprofit status, but also for our mission. We don't want to be, even if most of our members are Democrats, we don't want to be a Democratic organization or an organization to promote the goals of the Democratic Party. We want to be the organization that promotes the best ideas, and wherever those come from, those are the ideas we want to put forward. So that's Ballotpalooza. I mentioned Todd and I and a few others are working on a podcast called Next at the Mic. We're starting season 2 in September, and this is a political season, so we're going to be talking about ballot measures a lot in the next few weeks, and I think a lot of other ideas as we kind of talk about what are the things that we feel like Portland needs to start discussing, and what do we need to talk about in the next year. So I encourage you all to check that out. You can download, if you listen to podcasts, it's pretty easy. Just search Next at the Mic. Or if you wanted to just do it on your computer, you can go to this address and find our episodes. And we're, of course, always looking for sponsors. If you know of an organization that wants to support open dialogue and fresh ideas that are getting out to a broader audience than just the Portland core, let me know. And let's see, what else? And Jeff Merkley is coming soon. And because this is a political season, we're kind of kicking off with someone who's not running for office this year, but has a perspective since he was in the Oregon House for many years and now is in the U.S. Senate. He has this kind of national and local kind of dual perspective to bring to these elections. So I hope Republicans come and challenge him and ask lots of questions. And it should be a really great event. There's going to be a lot of people there. These kinds of events bring out the political wonks, of course. So those are the people that you'll see at Jeff Merkley's event. And then I mentioned this report briefly. We're talking about, does city government, the commission form of government, does this work for Portland? More specifically, do we get the kind of representation that represents the whole city? And we have 5 commissioners, which is a pretty small city council for most cities, and they're elected at large. And that means that whether you live on the west side or the east side or North Portland, you're all voting for the same people. And does that work? Does that bring candidates forward who are from sometimes the north, sometimes from the east side? Are we getting a mix of racial diversity? Are we getting women in those positions? And interestingly, we are right now, which I think is kind of fascinating. With the current structure, for the first time, we're going to have an African-American woman on our city council. But that one exception might, in fact, prove the rule. So this report is going to come out in October. I encourage you all, check it out on our website. And it'll kind of give you a taste of some of the other things that we're doing right now and maybe are to come. So, questions? Yes. Oh, I'm sorry, I don't direct questions.
Yeah, can you tell me what the actual mission statement is?
Oh, off the top of my head, I couldn't. But it is, there's a part I do remember. The end of the mission statement is to arouse in the public the obligation of citizenship. So this idea that, like, you are a member of this community. Our goal is to make sure that you recognize that you are part of this community and that you have an obligation to serve your community on some level.
Being a part of both organizations, I do see a lot of overlap in the values of the Humanists and the City Club. There are some differences. I think you guys have operated on a longer scale and a larger scale. We just celebrated our 20th anniversary last month. But you have a paid staff of 5, I believe. And one of the things I think is interesting is your paid staff, very young paid members interacting with a membership that trends older like ours does, and kind of talk about that dynamic between the paid staff and the members.
It's an interesting dynamic, if we're being totally honest here. I think the complexity of this dynamic is City Club actually did not have paid staff for a long time, into the 70s, I believe, and possibly even 80s. It was entirely volunteer run. So that meant the board of directors really was, or the board of governors, we call it, really was the group that directed everything. And I think the people who have been City Club members since that time and before I think still think of the Board of Governors as the primary moving force and staff as sort of administrative. And what we are kind of evolving into is the understanding that that model doesn't work very well because board members are usually very busy people who have full-time jobs and a lot of other responsibilities. So our executive director sort of collaborates with our board because it's very much a working board still, even despite the fact that we have 5 staff. They collaborate and really direct us, the rest of staff, and empower us to really make decisions to move our areas forward. We have a membership person or a kind of community, what is her title? Community engagement person. We have someone who directs all of our programs, the research, advocacy, and forums. We have an operations person. There's me, communications, and our executive director. And each of us is very empowered to kind of own our area at City Club. And the kind of transparent part of this is not all of our members like that, and they feel like we send out emails that say like, hey, this is a problem. People keep getting shot by police. We don't have the solutions here, but let's recognize this is a problem. We get members who are really upset that we even point that out as a problem, and they feel like staff does not have a role here. They should just tell us when the next event is and let us come to Friday Forum. We fundamentally disagree. I would encourage you to read a blog post I wrote. Actually, it's a series of 3 blog posts that really talk about how should City Club communicate in our community. What is our role as a staff, and what is our role as an organization in how we talk about things in our community. And the quick notes on that is basically like we have an obligation to our community, and we have an obligation to keep City Club strong. So in those cases when we need to report something to our community to just kind of let everyone know this is happening, we feel like it's very much in our area of responsibility, and anything that threatens the health and viability of City Club, for example, anything that would harm First Amendment rights. We don't need to go to our Board of Governors or to the membership to vote that we need to protect our First Amendment rights. We're going to take a stand on that without that bureaucracy, basically.
I read a story about City Club and a coming election maybe a month ago or so. Yeah. I wanted to find out, and it was characterized as something of the new way versus the old guard. Has that election happened? How did it turn out, and how do you interpret the results?
Yeah, it did happen. That article's in the Willamette Week. And sort of some of the things that I was just talking about, we have a group of members who feel like they are losing control of City Club, I think, and the way our Board of Governors is selected is by a board development committee. They recruit and interview and figure out who are the people they want to nominate for our Board of Governors. And so 2 members decide they also wanted to run, which we allow. We then have an election to vote on that. The 2 dissenters in this case did not win their seats. I do think it was a great process because it allowed us to really talk about some of the things that are tension points that haven't been really aired publicly. And I think that has been a really good, positive thing for us. And that's sort of part of what I feel my job is as communications director, is really to start facilitating these public conversations. So we were able to have that conversation, and we're going to probably keep having that conversation because I think it's been hard for some people to feel like inclusion should be a primary goal. They feel like, and I hope I'm characterizing their views appropriately, they feel like we need to be objective and dispassionate in a way that maybe means we don't recruit for diversity, that we just sort of let it happen and kind of hold everything at a distance. And that's how City Club has sort of operated in the past, but we feel like we can't be a relevant organization if we're not actually actively recruiting a diversity of thought and of identity and a membership that really reflects the society or our community as a whole. Because it's a very presumptuous thing the City Club is doing, right? We are saying this is what Portland or this is what Multnomah County needs to do in the future. We have 7 recommendations. Do those. Well, if we're making those kinds of recommendations, but we don't have the backing of the whole community, we just have this kind of slice of the community, I just don't think those recommendations carry as much weight as when they're really backed by a diversity of our community.
Oh, hi. Is your approach to marketing different at City Club than, say, HP?
Yeah. Nonprofits have so little money to market is one of the biggest reasons it's different. Whereas HP, even with all its troubles, if there was energy behind something, even if it was very expensive, it would happen. This is sort of the reverse. There's a lot of energy behind things that we feel like we really need to do, but we actually have no money to do it, and so a lot of those things don't happen. Our website is one of my frustrations. I could probably just start. I'm not going to go down the litany of all the marketing things I would love to do that we can't afford to do, but the challenge then is, so how do we still get City Club out there, and how do we show that this transformation is happening without a budget? And I think a lot of it is what I'm doing here today, to be kind of perfectly transparent. We need to go just talk to people. It's going to be a kind of word of mouth campaign, and it's going to be a lot of see this difference by, coming and having a conversation. And we're doing that with current members. We're doing that with the broader community. One area that we really need to find an opportunity with is people who are new to Portland. There's a lot of new people here in Portland who don't know City Club exists. They haven't grown up listening to it on OPB. And so we need to find those people and say, like, hey, new voices are also part of this conversation. And I think a lot of people who are new here feel like, I'm from California and people don't like me here. We can't be that organization. We can't be that kind of protectionist Portland elite organization anymore.
Hi there.
Sorry.
I'm over here.
Yeah.
Thank you for your work. I appreciate that you're there. And I'm a native Portlander. I would sit on a 42nd and Division with my friends, and we'd think that was the busiest street in Portland back in the 40s. But my question is, how is the City Club looking at our population growth? I feel my neighborhood is being overly built up, and I know other people do too. What's the position, or what are you thinking about that?
I don't know exactly where City Club is on this right now, to be honest. One of the complications here is I could give you my opinions, but I can't actually put forward what City Club has to say about this unless I'm able to refer to a report that we've done. And my knowledge of our reports isn't encyclopedic enough to actually give you a good answer there. Yeah.
Okay, I have a question on...
sorry.
Yeah, could you tell us a little bit about numbers and how that relates to your attempts to grow? For when I hear 5 paid staffers, I'm thinking, if your membership isn't up in the thousands, you're not paying for five permanent staff unless you have some real fat cats in there subsidizing the group. On the other hand, you want to bring in a cross-section of the whole community, and any reasonable level of dues to support 5 paid members is, that's not going to cut it with a lot of people in Portland who are living paycheck to paycheck and deep in debt. How can you balance those kinds of things? And you could go to the church model, which is sort of what we've done, where people get to, you get to pay what you can afford, but I don't know if you're doing that, or how are you trying to balance the economic realities of the current environment with the desire to be, equalitarian.
Right.
America's not a good place for equalitarian organizations right now.
Right. That is a real tension that we're trying to work through. We are working on changing our membership structure a little bit so that the lowest levels are lower and more accessible, and that, if I'll speak on my personal opinion, I would actually love a model where everyone could just pay whatever you want and you're in. I think that could work for us, actually, but we're not there yet. And so the structure that we're moving toward is kind of a sliding scale with some differences in benefits, and with the goal of let's make it more accessible to just get in and be part of it, but not maybe going far enough, if I'm speaking my opinion. But yeah, membership dues do not pay all of our costs. We also do a lot of fundraising. Our donors are probably not in the fat cat category. That Willamette Week article exposed, I love the transparency actually, but it talks about that we've actually operated in deficit most years, and our budget is well below $1 million. So we're not some sort of large, financially flush nonprofit, but sort of piecing together grants, donors, membership dues, we're able to keep it going.
Okay, you said you have a lot of people doing research. Do you draw from these people from a group? Like if you need a lawyer, there's a lawyer available. If you need a doctor to do the research, do you have doctors available?
Yeah, so the way the research works is we put together, people apply to be on a research committee, and we evaluate the applications based on a whole kind of wide range of criteria. And then, the reality of City Club is a lot of them probably are lawyers, but if we don't have that kind of expertise on the research committee, and we would do this even if we did have that expertise, we call witnesses. So that's how a lot of our research is done, is we contact people and ask them to be a witness and to testify on the issue. So you'll see in our ballot measure research, for example, we tried to get as many people on each sides of the ballot measure, and then a lot of people who have an interest who are an obvious advocate one way or the other. So like if we're talking about grocery taxes, one of the interesting pieces of this is there are some organizations that want to put taxes on soda. And so what is the medical perspective on that? Is that an effective way to improve public health? Then, of course, we're talking to economists. What is the economic view on adding these taxes? How does that affect prices in the community? On and on. So we talked to all these people with expertise and people on different ends of the political spectrum as well in order to get all those perspectives together and then evaluate this kind of mess of information that we get.
Is that published?
Yep, everyone is published. Every report that we've been able to find over the last 100 years, which is, I think, we have like more than 1,000 records in our research library. So you're welcome to look at any of those, and those ballot measure reports will come out on August 22nd.
My question might seem strange, but I don't think it hasn't been one you haven't heard before. Do you also go out like East County, you have members from East County and Clackamas and Washington counties?
We do try to. I think there's a lot of perception that, like, if I'm not in Portland, this isn't about me, but we have this branding challenge, I think, thinking about this from a marketing point of view, of the organization has always been called City Club of Portland. But the reality is we are advocating for things on the state level. We are talking about things regional as well. So absolutely, I mean, we need to do more in that way. We did do a State of the County with Deborah Kafori out in Troutdale in March. And we need to do more of those kinds of events that get out around Portland, get outside the city limits. And so we'll see if we can, again, it's a volunteer committee doing our forums, our events. So that's part of the role of staff, is to keep pushing them to say, like, have you thought about this? Do you think we can go to Washington County this time? Do you think we can go even to Vancouver? That'd be interesting to go across the border. Because we're talking about regional issues, and we're talking about issues that matter to a lot of people, not just, in the core, the downtown core of Portland.
Well, I'm from Beaverton, and my friend stole my question. And now, is it possible for me to be a member of City Club? And why should I be a member of City Club? And should I donate any money to them?
Anyone could be a member of City Club. There is no barrier. There's no vote that has to happen or some sort of minimum qualification, because we believe that everyone should have a voice in our community. And the reason to become a member, I think, is to be part of this kind of big tent organization that does bring people together from all over the region and from all over the political landscape to talk to people, to have these kinds of conversations that might be challenging, that might be fascinating, that might spark new ideas. I think if you're looking for a space where you can talk to people and get a new idea or understand the world a little bit differently, and then do something about it, like really affect policy, really affect the decisions that are being made about how people live here, we're, I think, the best place to come to do that, and especially that policy piece. If you really want to see something happen in our government at any level, we're city government, county government, metro, state. We have been involved with lobbying efforts at all those levels. And if you want to get involved in that, this is one of the best ways to tap into that opportunity.
What is your record of success in your endeavors, say, dealing with different agencies that really have the power to make a lot of decisions? I just wonder how successful you are.
We don't have we have no data on that. So that's a great question. One piece of data I do have is just on our current advocacy effort on earthquakes. They made, see if I can remember this correctly, they made 11 recommendations and I think have already gotten results on 4 or 5 of them and have 3 or 4 that are in progress, and the rest are still yet to come. So, this is a complex issue, of course. These recommendations are at multiple levels of government, and they're a volunteer committee of 6 or 7 people. So that's pretty impressive to me, and I think in the past, it's probably varied quite a bit. I'll say that advocacy is a newer thing for City Club. I think in the past, again, this is sort of the entitlement of City Club. In the past, they used to publish reports and be like, it's out there, the public now knows what to do. The reality of that is, that information is valuable, but it's awful presumptuous. And in fact, that information doesn't always get to the people who need to make those decisions. So in let's see, what year was that? I just saw it the other day. 2006, we actually created this advocacy board for the first time. So before that, there wasn't really an organized body to do the advocacy work on a research report. So your question has now made me think we could go from 2006 to the present and probably gather that data. In fact, that sounds like a great thing to get a committee to do, to evaluate, because I think that's an important question and part of the accountability that City Club hasn't done in the past that we need to do today. Like, are we actually being successful? Are we actually doing the things that we say we're trying to do?
With this diverse base and all the collaborative brainpower you describe, I would think you should be authoring ballot measures and instead of just trying to pick and choose among the ballot measures that the rest of the ignoramuses in Oregon managed to put on the ballot. Why aren't you doing that?
That's a Good question. I think that's, I mean, what's so great about that question is that I think it's a philosophical question about City Club and what its role is in our community. I think the model so far has been reactive, and that's often what watchdogs do, right? You watch to see what's going to happen, and then you pounce, right? So that's sort of maybe the kind of mental framework that City Club has brought to our role over the last 102 years, and maybe that needs to change. I would think one of the things that feels exciting about right now is we feel open to those kinds of questions for the first time. If you asked that question 10 years ago of someone at City Club, they would have been like, we can't do that. That is a terrible idea. That is a scary idea. And I don't think it's so scary, actually. It's a pretty interesting idea. Are we a proactive organization that actually evaluates an issue and then says, okay, this is the way to make that change. Let's put a ballot measure out there for the public to vote on. I don't think that's ever occurred to people, but it's interesting. Yeah.
This is a compliment. That City Club's been quoted, many times, but in by politicians and local newspapers. So you obviously do have some influence.
Yeah, thanks. And one of the things that we feel is our charge here is not a lot of people want to do this work to dig into, what is going on with grocery taxes? Why is this on the ballot? Most people tend to have a knee-jerk reaction to that, but not a lot of people want to spend the time to really dig in and ask, so what does this really mean? How is this really going to work? What are the pros and cons here? And that's the simpler question. The broader questions of what do we do if there's a big earthquake? How do we prepare so that we can save lives and save our city in the event of a massive earthquake? That's a very complex question, and there are certainly public agencies that are doing a lot of work on that, but they also have political challenges to that. And so we, being independent, we can ask those hard questions that are hard for bureaus to ask, that are hard for politicians to ask. We can dig into that and say, actually, this isn't going to make people happy. I think unreinforced masonry is probably an example of one of those issues. And it's going to be a political thicket, but this is the thing that needs to happen to save lives. And context on unreinforced masonry, if you're not familiar, we have a lot of brick buildings in Portland, and a lot of those buildings in an earthquake are going to just crumble to the ground. And we need a way to, and this is what our report found, we need a way to reinforce those buildings so that people will not be endangered living in those buildings. And what are those mechanisms? How do we do it is a very politically fraught question. It's going to be expensive. I think building owners are not excited about paying the money it takes to reinforce those buildings. But we feel that absolutely has to happen, and that's part of our advocacy effort to make sure it does happen.
I was a City Club member from 1990 until about 2015. I really do appreciate that you presented the differences since then. What I'd like best about it was you could ask the politician a question directly, and they'd give you an answer immediately. I think that is terribly invaluable. The part that I think we could work on, and the reason I kind of faded out, is the ideas thing, that people would really work on them. So I would like kind of a Nobel Peace Prize or something where they would have ideas and vote on them, and if they were really exceptional, really pursue them.
So you're talking about sort of at the philosophical level of this is an idea and this is something that the members can vote on.
For everybody to vote on new ideas.
Yeah.
Not something that's been reviewed forever.
Well, hopefully that's happening in the research they tend to be, it sounds like maybe you're talking about something kind of broad or
that they can present.
like just any member could come forward and say, I have an idea.
Any idea, review it, and quickly decide whether it's going to be in the later processes.
Oh, okay. I think what you're raising is another important challenge that we need to work through, and part of the strategic planning that we need to do will hopefully address this. Right now, it's pretty ad hoc about how questions get to the research board and actually get a committee on those things. Same is true about Friday Forum. It's often someone emailing the Friday Forum chair and saying, I want to do a Friday Forum on this. Will you do it? And so that is probably reality of the fact that everyone's running all the time, and we just need to do something, especially with the Friday Forum calendar. Friday comes every week, and you need to find a way to get people on stage. That's probably something that is familiar here as well. And so, yes, there needs to be a real process that recognizes also some of the things I've been talking about, that really puts our values forward and says, like, okay, just because you know the forum chair, that doesn't mean that we need to do a Friday Forum on this. We need to actually have ideas that are coming from all over the place.
Does City Club have any concerns about the problem of homelessness?
Absolutely. I don't know the City Club. Again, this is one of those encyclopedic problems. I know we've done a report on it, I think a few reports on it. I can't recall exactly what they say. I do think we're going to support the Metro bond, and I think public investment in affordable housing is something that we've supported over many years, and that is going to be a piece of the solution, but that's a big problem that goes well beyond housing, of course, because there's also mental health, and there's also the problem of the public sphere disinvesting in public services. And, so that's a long way to say I don't know exactly City Club's official stance, and it would probably vary depending on individual questions we're asking.
That I think is related to another question, and from your answer to my friend Sue here, it sounds as though City Club may not have considered dealing with the balance of development and livability of neighborhoods. Are we overdeveloping, and what do we need to do about that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I encourage, one of the things that's great about our research library is it's very searchable. So you can type in housing, you can type in any keywords, and reports will come up, not just from the last couple of years, but anytime in the last 100 years. And it'll be interesting, and this is something that maybe I should do soon, is to kind of trace the threads of thinking behind some of these issues like housing, where, Portland in the 50s had a very different perspective on housing than it does today. That'd be interesting to see how we've dealt with that over the years, and where are we now, and where we go again. Because I'm sure we're going to report on this again soon. Homelessness and affordable housing continue to be challenges that we don't seem to have a lot of solutions for.
How much does it cost to be a member of the City Club, and what is the kind of hierarchy of that structure?
There's a lot of levels. If you're a student, I think it's only $45, and it goes up. There's a senior rate that's $82.50. It's per year. It's all very complicated, and one of the nice things is we are revising all this, and in the new year it's going to be a little bit simpler. But I think for most members, it's right now it's $165 a year. Yeah.
Okay, I think that's it. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you.